pump is going to be under here. I think I've done over that already. 8mm. All right, once you get those bolts off of there, just take something lightly, tap up on it there. That O-ring there will sometimes stick. Typically not hard to pull off of there. You can remove that. Underneath there is your impeller. This is a stock impeller here. You can get aftermarket ones, and maybe Polaris even makes an aluminum impeller. And I would suggest replacing that. If this impeller stops working, you're going to end up blowing up your motor. So they get hot, they get warped, they start not functioning properly. Take a impact there, it's a 13mm socket, remove that. Now you can actually get in behind there and pry it up. Or what I like to do is actually just kind of wait and do that here in a little bit. So leave that impeller there. Problem is, if you're using a screwdriver to pry that up, a good chance you're going to damage up the surface area here or break that impeller. Now, if it's stock, you may as well just break it, because I would, again, suggest replacing that anyways. All right, now to get into your charging system. I think I've said that like 8 times already, that we're going to get into it, but now we seriously are going to get into it. So remove this cover here, 8mm bolts all the way around. Pull these bolts off of here, and then pull this cover off. And this cover should be sealed up really good. You don't want water, dirt, and debris down in there. You also do not want oil in this area. If you have oil, if there is oil in this flywheel, starter drive, Magneto assembly here, you've got issues. So I'm going to show you where those issues are. If you're getting oil into this housing here, I'm going to show you where that problem is here in a second. You've got an O-ring that seals that up. It's not a gasket, it's an O-ring, so make sure that that's in good condition. You also have a couple rubber grommets here. Well, I guess one rubber grommet here for your stator wires. I've showed you how to test those as well. We're going to go now and we're going to remove this flywheel here. This is important you watch this part of the video. All right, to remove this flywheel, we've got a 22mm socket here. Go ahead and pull that off of there. Also pull your washer off of there. Sometimes what I'll do to start is just grab some 2,4-D, spray it down here. This one actually looks in pretty good condition. Sometimes they get, if you've had water in here, or it's the Ranger's been sitting for a long time, or it's just really old, sometimes that WD-40 down in there will help loosen things up. Now I'll grab a puller, and I do sell these. I'll also put the link below. But you will not be able to do this project without this puller here. So there's our puller. And then I'll grab a couple bolts to run in here and snug these up. Now, if you cannot get these snugged up with your fingers, you will want to grab an impact or a wrench and snug these up. You don't want these bolts coming loose, pulling the threads out. So you want to make sure you've got these about a 1/2 inch down into your flywheel there. Run those all the way down. Make sure that your puller kit, whatever kit you, wherever you buy that from, if you don't buy it from me, make sure you've got the correct size bolts in there. You don't want to get something that's not the right size. What you'll end up doing is damaging your flywheel there, and then this flywheel, which is several $100s used, will be complete junk because you don't want to put it on there and you won't be able to get it off again. So 19mm is what our socket is right here. Run this in. Make sure all 3 of these bolts down here, these 3 10mm bolts, are equal. So if one of them's looser than the other one, your flywheel puller is going to be like tilted a bunch. You don't want that. Okay, and then what I do, you just saw it there. I'll take a hammer, and as soon as I get this snugged up, I'll leave my impact on there, or leave my socket on there, take and slam it down with the hammer. What that does is kind of jerks it down and pulls that flywheel off. Not all the time is that going to work. So don't just keep getting bigger hammers and take and slam it on there. I don't want you to damage anything, but that time it worked properly. If that didn't work, you would want to tighten it up a little bit more and try removing it that way. You can put quite a bit of pressure on there. The reason why I didn't for this one is actually because I didn't put the washers in there, and it was starting to pull these heads in a weird direction. I didn't want to break anything. So now we're done with this puller. To go back together, we won't actually need this puller. The reason why you have this puller and why you have to do it that way is because this flywheel here is actually tapered, and then the crankshaft is tapered. So when you put this together, that nut is going to tighten this down. It's going to force this flywheel onto this crankshaft there, and you're not just being able to take and pull it off. You also want to make sure you've got a woodruff key right here in your crankshaft. You want to line that up with that groove there. If you don't, you're not going to have spark on your four-wheeler because this isn't going to spin with your crankshaft, producing that power there. Also, these sometimes you'll see will get loose or they'll break off. If your Ranger doesn't end up having spark for some reason, that is something that you may want to check and see. Make sure this woodruff key is in there and in place, because that is what's creating this flywheel to spin. If this woodruff key is broke off or it's not there at all, then your flywheel is just going to stay attached to your stator there. It's not going to spin with your crankshaft there, and therefore you won't have any power. So that's your flywheel there. You've got your starter drive here. Some people call them a Bendix gear, and what that is when you engage that starter, it's going to turn this little gear here. It's going to spin this starter drive. It's going to spin this out. It's going to engage that flywheel over here, these gears, and it's going to turn that motor. Now, when that starter stops spinning, quickly and seamlessly slide back down and stop disengaging your starter and your starter drive gear. So then that gear is just going to be sitting in there like that until you hit that starter button again, and then it will it'll pull out again and do the same thing over and over again. So if your Bendix gear isn't functioning properly, your Ranger won't be able to start. Now to remove your stator there, what you're going to do is grab another Allen here. Coolest thing about this is you're not going to have to use the old Tyson's Allen wrench tool. You can actually use a socket and a ratchet here. These, I believe, are thread locked in there, at least I do, because this flywheel is spinning so fast. If you start to have these bolts come out of there, they work themselves out of there, they are going to cause some serious issues to your stator, your flywheel, and you're going to have some major problems there. So these bolts, you shouldn't need to pull these out unless you're doing a major motor overhaul or replacing this part, so you can just throw a little thread lock on there. You're not going to hurt anything by doing that. So this charging system, like I said, I've shot other videos on how to diagnose that. If you've got your Ranger that's overcharging or undercharging, maybe your battery isn't holding a charge, you may want to check your stator. You're also going to want to check your regulator rectifier. Again, check those videos out. I probably won't put a link below, but search those on my channel. You'll find them. Two 10mm bolts there. Those hold that plate in place so that your wires don't get caught up in your flywheel. Take and remove that. There's your stator there. I just dumped one of those bolts out. So you got to make sure we keep track of those, because those are a specialty bolt there. Holds that stator in place. We'll set that stator down. Now we're ready to pull this inner crankcase cover. And when you're doing that, you'll actually pull that impeller off of your shaft there. Shaft is actually your oil pump. I'll show you that here in a little bit. Two more bolts here on the outside that we needed to remove, and then we should be able to pull that plate off of there. You can grab a mallet, plastic mallet or rubber mallet. Just be careful when you're